ladies and gentlemen, dear Mr. President, Mr. Director, directors, and distinguished guests. Welcome to Reclaiming Classical Education 2, an international conference proudly hosted by the Learning Institute at Matthias Corvinus Collegium in partnership with the Ordo Iuris Institute for Legal Culture. We are honored to convene here in Warsaw, a city rich in history, resilience, and learning, to further a mission both noble and necessary, the revitalization of classical education in our schools and societies. Today we gather not simply to exchange ideas, but to assert the enduring relevance of tradition, intellectual excellence, and the moral imagination in education. Let this conference be a space of intellectual fellowship where knowledge is not only shared, but reclaimed. I'm Enikő Szakos, a researcher at the Learning Institute at MCC, and also a junior lecturer and head of strategic department of the Ludovika University of Public Service in Hungary. And I promise I will speak in English the whole day, so you don't have to translate from Hungarian and try to understand Hungarian. Before we start the panels and the keynotes, please welcome attorney Jerzy Kwaszenski, president of Ordo Iuris Institute, a leading figure in legal advisory and educational reform. Mr. Kwaszenski brings a profound commitment to the preservation of classical values in public life. May I now kindly invite Mr. President.
Dear guests, it's truly an honor to host this conference here in Warsaw. Thank you very much for Matthias Corvinus Collegium, a good partner for multiple projects. And I would say probably this is the most important of them all, because we are now addressing the future of our nations, the future of Europe, and the future of the civilization. All other topics covered in our cooperation with Matthias Corvinus Collegium with many other partners in Hungary are more contemporary, mostly on legal issues, political issues, while now we are speaking about culture. I'm very happy that this conference is co-organized on the side of Ordo Iuris by Artur Górecki, director for the Center of Education of Ordo Iuris, who under the conservative government was responsible as a director of the Ministry of Education for reintroducing Latin to Polish schools and reintroducing Latin to our exams after secondary schools as well, and who was hosting national congresses on classical education that were organized by the Polish government since 2021. I would say that we are just today also have a celebration of democracy in Poland. It's hard. It is hard not to speak about this victory, because this victory leads to a possibility of regaining power that is needed to reintroduce classical education in our country. What we are experiencing in the last 3 years, 2.5 years of the liberal government, is a fight against everything that is a classical education, a classical culture in our schools. It's an honor to have here also representatives of the Koalicja na rzecz ocalenia polskiej szkoły, the Coalition for Saving Polish School. It's a huge movement, unprecedented movement in the Polish history, of around 100 organizations, parental, educational, teachers' unions, conservative teachers' unions, yes, we have such unions in Poland, that are opposing the governmental reforms on both curricula and organization of schools, that are a voice of concern over parental rights and on the rights of the children. This conference is also a way to empower those who are opposing the government in Poland. It's a way to empower those who need not only to fight the liberal reforms, but also to present a positive approach and a good program for Polish schools and the resurrection of a proper approach to education in Europe. Thank you very much for being with us. It's a true pleasure to have this conference here in Klub Stańczyka. Klub Stańczyka is a newly opened membership club, conservative club, the first on the map of Poland. Yes, we were to some extent inspired by our Hungarian friends. At the same time, we are opening a very similar club in Zagreb with our friends from Vigilare and Ordo Iuris Croatia. We need this kind of a network for networking conservatives all over Europe. And Stańczyk is a very important and interesting patron for this place. Stańczyk was a jester, not a politician, not a king, but a jester that is more known among Polish people than kings of 16th century. A jester that served 3 of our kings, both the Jagiellonian dynasty and the first electorals. Jester that was presented in our history and is part of our tradition as a man responsible for the state and the community, a political thinker, somebody who is able to present what is coming and to understand what is coming in a way much deeper than the politicians themselves. So let's hope for this jester approach during today's conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your opening remarks. And now, in the following, we will hear from Dr. Milan Konstantinovic, Director of Professional and Education Affairs at Matthias Corvinus Collegium. Dr. Konstantinovic's work at MCC has helped revive the landscape of talent management in Hungary with a dedication to the renewal of intellectual heritage. It is my pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Konstantinovic.
Dear President, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Matthias Corvinus Collegium, I would like to welcome you all here in Warsaw in this club at the beginning of an exciting day. This conference is a forum for sharing experiences and discussions. Our experts here, coming from all over the world, have different educational backgrounds, have socialized, researched, and taught in different educational systems. I think this diversity of knowledge and experience will be brought together at this conference, where, as the publication Reclaiming Classical Education shows, we are united by the issues future brings. We share one common goal: to formulate answers for questions related to the traditional school survivor, the education of Generation Alpha, and the teacher's current and future's role. Therefore, panel discussion will address fundamental dilemmas that basically shape our visions of future's school. Is there a need for a cultural canon? Is there still a global and national core knowledge that schools should be responsible for transmitting? Where is the place and what is the role of the teachers in a digital world? And more broadly speaking, are classical values, teaching methods, and approaches still valid today? I'm also the author of this specific publication that borrows the name of the conference, or vice versa, which was published by the MCC's Learning Institute, and I try to outline some possible answers. My approach stems primarily from the perspective of rhetoric, because I'm convinced that rhetorical foundations laid down by Aristotle and enriched by the Romans are well suited to face future challenges. Rhetoric transmits classical knowledge, promotes cultural initiations, and not least, creates community. In my view, these are precisely what is needed in the schools of the future: cultural base, cross-generational cultural continuity, and real human community. I'm sure that there are many valid ways to build on these ancient, on these classical foundations to achieve these educational goals, which will certainly be discussed at this conference. I'm also sure that this occasion will not mark the end of the reflection process we have started here. I hope we sum up, we store, and maybe we will outline tasks that will be the subject of further research, meetings, and exchanges of views. Let us bear in mind the pithy metaphor of the great 20th century rhetorician Kenneth Burke, who built on the Aristotelian foundations. He said, "Words are like planets, each with its own gravitational pull. In the same way, our exchange has a gravitational pull too, and I hope it will attract many new initiatives." I wish you all a good debate and let the reflection flow. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Director. As I know my colleagues at MCC and all around the world, we will not stop until Reclaiming Classical Education 100. So let's hope that it continues. And thank you for the questions you raised. Luckily, we have a whole day to reflect and answer them. And now the floor will be... And the whole stage will be Dr. János Setényi's, Director of MCC's Learning Institute. Mr. Setényi has dedicated his career to reforming and revitalizing education policy not only in Hungary, but throughout Central Europe, and his leadership at MCC's Learning Institute renewed attention to the enduring significance to classical learning. Mr. Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. The title of this first keynote speech is Reclaiming Classic Education from Theory to Action. And this is very important, from theory to action, because in this series we have the same conference in Brussels first, where we tried to create a common understanding around the idea of classic education, European traditions, and so and so and so. And this is the second one where I would like to shift the focus on action. And that is not easy, because my old friend from Heritage Foundation, Mike Gonzalez, once said that every liberal on planet Earth nowadays is the same. You know, those blue hair, piercing, tattoo, LGBTQ things, from Patagonia to Greenland, and from Greenland to South Korea, they are pretty much the same, but every conservatives are different. The Polish conservatives are not Hungarians, not to mention the British conservatives. I mean them in a good sense now, with a certain amount of hope of recovery. And the Americans are certain Republicans. There are many streams of them, of course, but they are certainly not the same. I can discover two big division lines. One is in the continent we still believe that state sometimes can make some reasonable good public policies. The Anglo-Saxons are very suspicious about that. Understandably, it's a different tradition, okay? And the other is, and here my words will be taken from Hungary, which is still a free country, so I will be very blunt in this way, that when we are talking about Polish education or Hungarian education, we are still struggling with our children, right? In the school, we have Polish children and Hungarian children. Difficult sometimes, but these are our children. Whenever, if you see a Brussels kindergarten or school or a school in Vienna, well, that is a slightly different view, and you are not necessarily working, helping your own children. That is a division line. It's a totally different task, to be very honest. So let's see the actions. These are the conservative policies I can discover, and then you can identify your countries. This is the lonely warrior. I met, these are individuals mostly. I met these kind of school directors in Britain, for instance, but in other countries too. They say that everything is collapsed, of course, and there's no hope. But in my school, I make high quality, rigorous classical education for my kids, who are, by the way, Bangladeshis and others. But I hold the front line. I don't give up, right? This is the lonely hero. We have some in Hungary, like in Roma education, but all in all, we are belonging to the other type. We are in power in a normal elected government, and we are designing public policies to promote academic excellence and other things. So obviously the space for maneuver is totally different. This is Poland. I knew the results of the elections yesterday because I am a historian by degree. It's a joke. But you know, that's a healthy thing. Sometimes the liberals are in power and they try to make the usual destruction. This is their job. You have to understand. You don't have to hate them for that. This is their job, to destroy traditional values. But then the people got some more common sense and the pendulum turns back. And this is what I see sometimes when I speak with some American colleagues who are talking about vouchers, quasi-privatization, charter schools, and things like that. This is the arc of Noé, which is that let's save those children we can save, and let's sail away from the mainstream. And what happens with other schools, we can't manage that. Happens what happens, but at least the sensible children should be saved. This is the arc of Noah. By the way, their semi-god Friedman was a Hungarian economist. Be careful with the Hungarians. Okay. So one problem is that education is reflecting, it's not just in crisis. We have, of course, a common understanding about that, but it's reflecting social crisis, cultural decline, also pedagogical mismanagement, child-centered reforms, the existential and professional crisis of the teaching profession. And until the let's say the year 2000, United States was the unchallenged, unrivaled hegemon of the world. So all these educational things and criticism was a family matter between Democrats and Republicans. You know, there's a usual boxing match, how to correct and change the things. But this is a different world now. These are the high quality natural science publications in magazine Nature. That's the leading magazine of natural sciences in the world. And you see the #1 is now China. It's not a family matter within the Western civilization. We will be left behind far if we continue like this. You can add certain things to these problem areas. Everybody knows this, the curriculum-driven declining standards, the cultural authority problem, global competition, employer disengagement, and so and so. But here, we are not very strong yet, the conservatives. That is the learners' discipline, this is the collapse of discipline, and the medicalization of these social problems. This is very important, and the glorification of these learning failures, like she has an autism spectrum things, or a behavioral thing is then ADHD problem, and so and so and so. And these families and children are glorified like very special ones who need very, very special care. In this area, we should be much, much stronger and much more visible in the future with a strong professional criticism. This is a battlefield. When I started it in Hungary, inspired by Frank Furedi, a British professor, another dangerous Hungarian, who is the boss of the Brussels Center of MCC, immediately I received a hostile storm of psychologists and this whole profession. Of course, they are living off from this problem identification. I tried to collect 4 principles of a potential conservative renewal. It's policy-oriented, so it's not just the problems and just theory. One is the restore the idea that knowledge matters and only facts enable critical thinking. That goes to the curriculum and the standards, needless to say. The second thing is discipline fosters freedom, so there's no deep learning without structures, cognitive structures, no deep learning. Teachers are experts and the parents are only partners, very important partners, but partners in learning, and they need a coalition. I'm very happy that Mr. Kwaśniewski mentioned that in Poland, the Poles are very strong in the socialization of their movements. They have centuries-old tradition of that. We don't have in Budapest a parental movement around conservative education, which we are very good in general, but we don't have parental. They do have. So this is something I will bring home to learn from you, and we need more parents as a movement who support classical values and serious learning. Very, very impressive. And of course, excellence is inclusive, so we propose equity through high standards and not low standards. Equity with low standards damages the society, of course. Okay? So what are the policies to turn the tide? I propose, here we have 7, but I learned from Mr. Kwaśniewski an 8th one, so 8 policies. They are interconnected, needless to say, but you know your countries. Every conservative is different. You know your own countries, so obviously the stress should be put according to your daily political and social realities. One is curriculum. Curriculum should be knowledge-rich and mastery-based. The second is teacher training, which is going into a very bad direction for decades, actually. It's a rot, and we cannot heal it by actual reforms within 5 years. I think it's a 20 years long march, but we have to start, at least. In US, it's a special problem because they are unionized and the Democrats. You need a new coalition with your teachers, with some teachers, to destroy this cage of the unions and the political indoctrination of teacher training. School autonomy, which is a kind of flexibility combined with central governmental accountability. So yes, you can modify a little bit your curriculum. Yes, you can make it more flexible. But on the other hand, it is not possible that in your school 60% of your students are illiterate, practically, or functional illiterate. No, it's not possible. Then your school will be closed or reorganized, right? Parental engagement. We want to know more about the Poles here. Employer alignment, cultural renewal, and youth movement. The last 2 are important. The cultural renewal is important because this mass culture, which is a commercial culture basically, and it's global, I love the American colleagues, but I have to tell that this is also American-made mass culture, global culture. Is basically destroying everything in the afternoon which we have built in the morning in the schools. They go home, they click on, and it's over. So we need the new cultural movements here. We should celebrate intellectual and moral achievements. Moral is very important. 200 years ago, we put moral achievements to our children. After that, we don't do it anymore. We are putting professional achievements, and now we have the celebrity culture when people are celebrating their biological existence. They think it's fantastic to exist. And the final is youth movement. We have to call the students as well. We are planning a decathlon model, which is a 10-month challenge for students in MCC. The first month is digital detox. No digital gadgets and so, the first month. But also from planting trees to help civil organizations, learning a classical poem with memorization, this kind of challenges for 10 months. We hope that the next year 10,000 of students will join to this decathlon. You know, it's a little bit like a digital movement. It's a little bit like 21st century postmodern, but we have to mobilize the students behind the conservative idea. We haven't done yet. We were always talking to adult people. That doesn't work. We need the students as well. And again, and finally, I have 2 minutes, so I'm on time. Every conservative is different. Every country is different. You have to define that from these policy measures, actions, what is in your or under your jurisdiction at the moment? Are you lonely heroes? It's okay. Then you protect your remaining values. Are you saving the capable children and the rest will sink? Because you can't do more at the moment. There is a very strong liberal hegemony. Do you have a chance to get into a government after elections and then you can make some public policies? Or you have a more stable conservative government, whatever it is, because not all conservative governments are so beautiful sometimes, but at least they have the time to start long-term policies. And finally, my final words is just about MCC. MCC is the creation of the second Orbán government in Hungary, when they realized that if they continue only by governing the country, then every second election will be won by the liberals, because that's the global trend. And for 4 years, you can't do practically anything. They decided to make long-term investment to create a new elite, new intellectuals, and that is MCC. So I wish you to belong to this part sooner or later, but even if you are lonely heroes, I think the fight is worthwhile and go ahead. And I wish you that today we can talk more about actions and less about our beautiful theoretic frameworks and concepts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shetényi, for this very insightful keynote. And now let me welcome Dr. Artur Gurecki, the director of the Ordo Iuris Educational Center, who already had a very nice introduction in the morning. As a key contributor to the Polish intellectual landscape, Dr. Gurecki strengthens the moral and institutional foundation of classical education in national curricula. His remarks this morning will set the stage for the first panel. I now invite you to give a keynote.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that this event has reached its existence, because we had some problems. I'm very happy, and a big thank you for all the Hungarian friends for your cooperation with Ordo Iuris. I will not have a very big welcome because it has been already done by Jerzy Kwaśniewski, but let me speak, let me say in a few words, in this moment I will try to draw the scope, the way of our understanding what we call classical education. One of the reasons we're meeting today is this unprecedented degradation of our Western Latin culture, which consists in cutting it off from its roots, from what is timeless. Not without any reason, one of the authors of these changes, Ryszard Roti, has written that the way of speaking is even more important than the truth. And in another place, he also wrote that any text is just a pretext to the auto-creation and narration. I would just like to add that this is unfortunately the problem of not a small part of the conservative part. The regress of the culture is shown by the epistemological relativism that negates the existence of the truth, that approves the moral deviations and vulgarisms and axiological nihilism. So if we add to that what happens in the academic scientific light, so the ideologization and politicization of scientific research and the political axiological atrophy, and I will say a few words in the educational context about that. So this is why all these problems that I have mentioned, and especially they relate to and they are focused on the area of education, what has been already mentioned, because this is one of the areas where we are forging our the human beings. In Poland, in the last years, we have been experiencing it in a tangible way. All the negative processes that have been present in education for a long time. Please remember that the problem with the education, the system of education as it works today, not only in Poland but in the whole world, we can say, in most countries of Europe, this is the problem that has quite big and deep roots. I hope that some of our speakers will talk about it later. But all the negative processes that are present have been present in our education for a long time have gained an extraordinary momentum, and one of the fruits of this action is the reform that is being prepared and implemented in stage, and we will see full shape in 2026. One of the elements is the profile of the graduated that is supposed to show what kind of person from the political and professional point of view is needed on the market, and not how the human being should be. There is an unprecedented attack on religious education. The sex education is being implemented under the guise of health education, and destructive changes have been made to history education and education on social life, on humankind. What I'm talking about is related not only to the Polish school, because we can talk about international, overnational forces of destruction. Today's conference is devoted to classical education, which we will also try to, during today's meeting, define, perhaps even comparing different approaches and understandings. Sometimes, at least in Polish pedagogical literature, the classical education is equated with the birth of modern pedagogy and the changes that came to education at the beginning of the 19th century on the wave of Wilhelm von Humboldt's reforms and the popularity of Herbert's pedagogy, which reduced the classical model of education to the study of languages and literature. And this is not the classical education that we, or at least I, have in my mind. At this point, I would like to make a few remarks of general nature, which I hope to expand on later. I would like to point out, which is not without significance, that I have been involved in classical education for over a dozen years. What has been already mentioned by our president, I would just like to add one more area that for 20 years I have been a teacher of history, working in school, and for 17 years a headmaster of different private schools. And among them were such schools that tried to base their curriculum on the classical education model. There were many challenges, of course. It's a very huge topic, but there is an experience that I can stand here in front of you and add something valuable to our discussion today, I hope. So what is classical education? In short, it is a program and process of teaching and educating people with the aim of fully developing the human nature. Its goal is to improve the human as a human being, so his reason, will, and ordering his feelings. Its roots go back to the Greek paideia, when ways of improving the human intellect and will were discovered. These principles were adopted and modified by the Romans, and then purified and refined by Christianity, which based its missions on evangelization and teaching of nations. So education understood in this way, corresponding to what is man, is wisdom-oriented, so it is a knowledge of the whole reality in the light of its first causes. Today, wisdom is most often equated with erudition, so encyclopedic knowledge. So the education serves man, this education, as a human being, so that he may direct his life well and achieve a goal in accordance to his nature. And in this view, education is the establishment of the natural order of the soul, and it is achieved through forming the character which should be based on what is eternal and perfect, and not what is changing and what is dictated by the moment or the utilitarian conditions and circumstances. In classical education, what was always very important, the artes liberales had its important place, which were exercises in practicing the skills of understanding in the area of word, trivium, grammar, rhetoric, dialectic, and in the area of numbers, so quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the canon of timeless works comprising what is today called the belles lettres, but also political, theological, and wisdom treatises. Only such education is universal and exemplary because it corresponds to human nature. Nevertheless, the geographical place and the time. Meanwhile, the constant search for changes in the field of education seem to be well described by the metaphor of a mountain giving birth to a mouse. Someone once said that wherever the good life is at stake, only what is false is truly new. And this is undoubtedly in the case of education. We live in times of relativism and nihilism. Leo Strauss writes that nihilism is the inability to take a stand behind civilization against cannibalism. Today's understanding of science, on the one hand, still affected by the scientism and positivism, and on the other hand, dissolving in the depth of postmodernism, has nothing to do with classical understanding as an effort undertaken by man to know and understand the whole to which he belongs. We can only hope that today's conference will contribute to ensuring that this model of education, the most enduring one in our cultural circle, that in the modern school has been nothing almost left, will not be seen as a strange foreign body in pedagogy, but will be treated by an increasing number of people as the only real alternative to the educational collapse that we're facing nowadays. The only alternative to education subordinated to utilitarian goals, including the requirements of the labor market, and the only alternative to education based not on realistic anthropology, how things should be, but on the political and economic demands of the moment. Professor John Senior, in his book The Decline and Restoration of Christian Culture, describes the minimum necessary for such actions as follows: stick to a few undeniably good books and a few real rules of grammar and rhetoric, and stay away from those itchy reading lists, and above all, from those endless, sterile, stupid discussions of current events which have almost replaced serious study of history and literature. That's the end of the quotation. It is not an easy path, but I believe it is possible. I wish you a very fruitful time here, and thank you for your attention once again, and for this today's conference that we achieved it and came here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Górecki, and please take your seat at the roundtable discussion, where we'll be exploring the questions of classical education further. Thank you very much. And now I will invite the other panelists, and please, when you hear your name, take your seat at the roundtable. First, I will invite our moderator of the discussion, Áron Fekete, project manager at MCC Learning Institute, who holds a PhD in history. Dr. Alka Szegál-Cuthbert, advisor at MCC and director of the advocacy group Don't Divide Us, and amongst many, she's an educator, academic, author, and campaigner. I invite to the stage Thibaut Giblin, historian and political scientist who has been a visiting fellow of MCC so long he has published a book about the Hungarian political regime, which is published in multiple languages. I invite Szabolcs Nagypál, workshop leader at MCC Law School, Catholic theologian and scholar of religion, specializing in the philosophy of law.
Okay, thank you, Aniko, for introducing us. I would like to also welcome everyone at this conference. In my view, our panelists contributed fascinating and captivating studies to the book presented today. So I would like to start to introduce my first question with the so the quotation starts here. The ideal of education that we call classical education is undoubtedly the most enduring educational meta program in our cultural history. And my question is the following: what does classical education mean to you, and why is it significant in the 21st century education? And I recommend that start with Szabolcs.
Thank you. Greetings to you all. We are members of a civilization. Samuel Huntington talks about 8 civilizations in the present world, and we live in one of them. He calls it Western civilization. I would prefer Judeo-Christian civilization with enlightenment. And classical education is the great means to introduce us to be members of this civilization, to be responsible members of this civilization. Civilization can have 2 meanings. One is how to behave, how to use technical tools, and another meaning is the great ideas and values to be safeguarded. Within the civilization, there are nations, and classical education introduces us for responsible citizenship. Nation is a dubious concept in Central Europe, where we are now. It usually means something which is connected to the territory, to the language, most of the time to religion. But the key word I would say is history, or to be very modern or postmodern, a story. So a person is a member of a nation who is a participant in the same story as the other people. And the classical education has a role to give this feeling, to give this attachment to the nation. In my language, it is not classical education, but conservative education, which is used most of the time. I know in English it's a bit different. And conservatism, and this is my last thought to this question, sees the word that we are like a tree. The root is unchanging where we come from. And we are responsible for this tree. We cannot construct everything, but we come from somewhere, and we have certain directions which we can follow, and we should do it in an organic way, not in a revolutionary way, turning upside down everything, but step by step. And conservative education or classical education teaches this moderation.
Thank you very much. This is a real pleasure to be here. I have a kind of historical approach regarding classical education, because this is my way of thinking as a historian. I think there is 3 fundamental pillars of it. First one, this is aesthetics. Classic is related to aesthetics in a sense that harmony and equilibrium is the base of this sense of beauty. The second one is seniority, means the devotion we have regarding the past, the authority there is in the past. And in Greek language, arche is the same word, both for the beginning, the origin, and the commandment. Third aspect to me, this is the arete, so the excellence. In Greek, all this Greek dynamic in education was relied on excellence, and this is the meaning of the paideia, as Werner Jaeger, for instance, demonstrated in his works. And the last one, this is Greek and Latin history. Means that this is the Ariadne thread that helps us to continue this civilization that started in Greece 5 or 6 centuries before Christ. What does matter very much is that these 4 pillars are not separated from each other. They are linked by a real unity. Beauty is not the mere appearance of things. Beauty reveals the inner structure of what is excellence. And what is related to this excellence is not this quantitative excellence that we have in our materialist civilization, the modern one. This is this virtuosity, how to be a man at its own place. So we are not in a very, let's say, brutal competition to each other. It's rather that how to be myself at the right place. And this is the real meaning of know yourself, the Delphic motto on the Temple of Apollo. So yeah, these 4 pillars and the unity between them. This is, to me, what is the definition of classical mind and the inspiration of classical education.
Thank you. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me to come and speak. I think one way of defining classical education is to look at it substantively, as in what the curriculum should consist of, and we can look at it historically, as you've done. I think, for me, having had debates with my husband who did study Latin, and I never did, do we need to study Latin to have a classical education? Certainly the people I know who have studied Latin speak with a precision that I admire and find very inspiring. However, that doesn't mean everybody who speaks so precisely speaks wisely or with good judgment. So I think there's something more to be had with classical education, which brings me to, for me, the 2 key principles. I suppose this is from a philosophical or ethical philosophy paradigm. Is that there are 2 imperatives that are integral to classical education, and I would argue to education fundamentally. And it's a temporal and a normative aspect. I think the temporal one is to do with knowledge, and I would link that to the idea of natality, as Hannah Arendt speaks of it, that you're born into a world that already exists, and you're born into a cultural world where knowledge of that world already exists. So we have a fundamental differentiation between what we'd call sacred, in the past it's been called sacred knowledge or canonical knowledge, and then the knowledge of everyday life and living, functional, socio-cultural language and knowledge. That boundary has been all but forgotten, certainly in Britain and probably in most Western nations, because that requires a particular pedagogy and dispositions that you want to foster to encourage younger children to be able to engage with it, be familiar with it, possibly reject it if they wish to when they're older, or modify it. I would have that element of freedom at the right time in our minds when we enter classical education. So that's the knowledge temporal aspect of it. The ethical dimension is that of judgment, and that really requires upholding a standard of truth and truthfulness. And of course, the relativistic culture and times we live in today is extremely hostile to that. So judgment in Britain, and I'm sure in other countries, is now nearly always outsourced either to science in the form of let's find what the evidence says, or it is outsourced to a kind of fake moralistic historical determinism, as in identity politics. Neither of those, of course, have any place for truth or truthfulness, because you don't need it, because it's already determined by ways of thinking that have external laws of robustness and true, their standards of what counts. Neither of that takes into account the importance of human subjectivity and the importance of belief. And I would say, more than anything, for classical education, I would go by my current hero. It was and remains Kant, but now he's joined by St. Augustine, which is before you can reason, you have to know what you believe. And I think in a society or culture that pays no heed to the question of belief, that's going to be just as important a hurdle to overcome as the institutional and political ones.
Dziękuję.
Thank you very much. So I will answer in a short way, pointing out to three elements that are kind of adding information to what I have already presented to you. And they are the foundation, the pillar as well, of what I understand as classical education. The first question is who is the man and how he should be, so that he is what he's supposed to be. So this is what is the realization of the human nature. We first recognize it, we then look where is the direction where it should be developed, so that it is fully developed, so coming from its capacity to action and then supporting in this development. So we are not creating, inventing how it should be, no constructivism anthropology. So who is the human being? The realistic answer to this question. The second element is such a placement of his development so that we make it easier to master the will and cognition to work well. So what in a philosophical tradition was called virtues. So such a usage of our powers so that it leads only to good, so that our intellect recognizes the truth and the will that chooses the good, so the proper good for the human. And the third element is the conviction that there is an objective order of things. So this is not something that is a matter of discussions, debating, constructivism, but things are as they are. And the human mind that is not supposed to go to only the processes of physical and biological processes that go down to that. So the human mentality should recognize this order. So these three elements, realistic anthropology, enabling human powers to recognize what is good, and the cognition and the will, this is how we should name it. And the third element, so the truth about the objective order of things and the possibility of recognizing it by the human intellect. Thank you.
Szabolcs mentioned that religion had a huge impact on human civilization. So my next question is the following. What role has religion played in shaping classical education, and how should we approach this question today? And let's switch up and start with Arthur in this round.
That's a very difficult question because we can go to political correctness and try not to offend anyone, but the answer will be as I think, I see it, the most honest way I can in my intellect and morality. The religion is nothing that has to stick to humans' life. This is nothing that is covering all the important things, and it is not even more something that is limited to the church and the private life of your house, your home. So if it's true what I have said before, that the existence of the objective reality and its order, so the natural question would be, who stands by the foundation of this order that we recognize, that we see in our soul, that we see in the surrounding world? And in the moment when this transcendency, so what is going beyond the physical, natural things, we try to eradicate it from our life. We are reducing it. And it causes our normal, everyday life of a human being, and including education and upbringing, is impossible, because it would also be not fully valid. It will never tell the whole truth about the human being. So the religion is one of the elements of the objective recognition of the reality, and not a projection of our imagination from such or other reasons, how it is perceived by some of the philosophers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I very... Can you hear me? Yeah. Very much agree with what you've just said about the role of religion. I think, going back to what the point I said before about if you like, the split in knowledge. In the sacred knowledge, there is we could not conceive of it if we did not already have an intuitive, if you like, understanding of something transcendental. And I think in the modern period, we've tried to locate the transcendental within a secular humanist paradigm. And that hasn't been totally disastrous. It has allowed quite, elements of progress and elements of freedom that previous religious paradigm, if you like, had stifled. But I don't think there is anything intrinsic within the religious paradigm that means that it has. In fact, now I think transcendentalism located within a secular human framework is limited, because humans are limited. Right? So how can you ground something transcendental in something that is, by definition, limited and historical? So belief, that's what I think the importance of belief, and the major source of belief has been religion, and in the West it's been Christianity. And practically and historically and politically it has been the church that has provided schools, provided education, first in the monasteries, and then through schools for younger pupils, with the aim, the overarching aim to introduce people to good judgment, to their learning or being able to recognise objectively what truth means, what beauty means, but with a view to preparing themselves for God, right? It was never just for, to become a better person. It was never just to be, get a better score or to become the perfect individual human being. It was to perfect yourself for God. And we've really lost that. And I don't know how that can be reclaimed or whether we'd want to claim it in that way. But it's a question we need to be asking and discussing.
So when we observe the rise of classical aesthetics and system and education back in the ancient Greek, of course that we observe how religion did matter at that time. When we read Homer poems, we remark how in the daily life religions was anytime present. And this was a real structure of the worldview of the Greeks who created this classical education. The same when the Roman Republic took over the entire Mediterranean basin, the mos maiorum, so the religion of Romans, were decisive in their way of life. And to my opinion, classical education means completeness. And as much as we need a ground under our feet, we need a sky above our head. So this completeness is really linked to spiritual reality and to religious life. Of course, in Europe, post-Roman Europe, that was Christianity that played this role. And Christianity shaped the worldview of Europeans. And to that extent, there was the possibility to reenact classical education in a Christian world, a world becoming Christian. We should consider what this religious worldview is. This is the way that we understand the world. And as identity is a window through we see the world, religion is the basic of our metaphysical conception. And so we can interact and we can understand the complexity, the beauty of the world. But we should understand as well why there was this decline of Christianity in the European mind. This is this crisis of European mind that occurred at the beginning of the 18th century in Europe, that was well defined by Paul Hazard, French historians. This is that we had this civil war of religions in Europe, of course with the rise of Protestantism, and all these clashes of different views between Christians led to a very negative consideration regarding this metaphysical debate, and we decided that, okay, empirism is the negative answer to this crisis. We will start from scratch and only have a material understanding of the world, because this is the only way to avoid this spiritual war. And this is interesting to understand this historical development, because if there is a reconciliation between spirituality and European mind, it will be through understanding the historical development of our society now, and the fact that our materialism is so limited, so poor, it led to such a cultural decadence that we embrace again a worldview that is full of sense and based on a spiritual dimension.
Some points which Christianity gave to the issue of education and came to my mind. One thing is I was in the global leadership of the World Student Christian Federation, the oldest ecumenical organization in the world, and we had a saying that we should have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. And one should understand the other, using the other. So we understand more the Bible when seeing what are the important news in the world, and vice versa. I would add that we should have a bookshelf full of books behind our back. Human erudition is also very important as a third factor. Another point which comes to my mind is the legacy of questioning in Christianity. Anything can be questioned and should be questioned, and the great Christian universities in the Middle Ages are great examples for this. Thomas Aquinas has one of his opuses is the Questiones Disputate, the disputed questions. So the questions which were disputed in the university, he tries to answer them in a highly organized way. Another of his works is Questiones quodlibetales, which means that you could really ask anything. There is no stupid question, thought Thomas Aquinas as well. And from a strange question, he made again a very organized theological answer. Also I was participating in an interreligious project in a newspaper from the 5 world religions. One person was asked the same strange or even stupid questions like, can robots go to heaven? And from such a question, which comes from the newspapers, great teachings came to the fore. Another thing which Christianity gave to the issue of classical education is the notion of tradition. Tradition is not a dead thing, it's something which is living. We inherit it from the past and we are responsible for give it as an inheritance to the next generation and keeping it alive. So we shouldn't give a dead thing either. We should keep it alive, and it's a great movement of ideas and thought which we mobilize in our intellectual life. Also, Christianity was forced not only to debates, but also to dialogue. Dialogue within itself. In Christianity, it's ecumenical dialogue between denominations, but also dialogue with other world religions, interreligious or interfaith dialogue, or even dialogue with the Word. So this methodology of dialogue, which is not debate, but listening to each other, express ourselves and searching together for the truth and going deep to the roots of things, is an offer from Christianity as a method to education as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to share with you one thing just on the specific contribution of Christianity to the education of classical education or liberal classical or however. And that is the question of free will and questioning. Because often people think of a classical education or a religious-based education as the opposite. They think of it as, you know, imprisoning your mind and just sort of going along blindly with orthodoxies given from on high. But actually, there was a very interesting disputation. Well, it wasn't a disputation; it was just a disagreement between Durkheim and Ernst Cassirer, and it was about the question of free will. And Durkheim proposed that the taboos went back eternally throughout history, so he was quite ahistorical. Cassirer criticised him for that and said, actually, you could not have taboo until you had free will. And free will, we first come across free will in the Bible in, I think it's Genesis, I'm not too sure, but in Adam and Eve, when they have the choice to obey God and not eat of the tree of knowledge or to disobey God. And then after that, you know, God also knows what they have done, but he asks them, what have you done? So he expects them to give an account of their you know, to apply reason to their own actions. And those, of course, are two fundamental things that are core, without which you could not have education in any sense of the word. So for me, Christianity, I mean, you couldn't do any better, you couldn't do worse than, you know, sort of basically introduce children to the Bible, not as a blind orthodoxy, but as a way of engaging their own dispositions and faculties and develop their judgment.
All of you highlighted what kind of challenges facing religion and spirituality nowadays. So my next question is the following. What are the main challenges facing classical education today, and how can we address these issues to keep it relevant in modern schools?
We already mentioned constructivism. It's a world view. It's a spirit of our age. It means that we can construct anything, and we are the ones to construct the world. Of course, it's partly true, but it doesn't recognize the nature of things. So the answer to constructivism is searching for the order in the world and for the nature of things, and human nature included. Another challenge which I see, I teach in a university, so what I say is in the university level is a critical attitude. There's nothing wrong with critics, of course, but critics, as we already heard today, should come from knowledge. So the empty critical attitude means that the first gesture of the students is to find something wrong in an idea, in a way of thinking, in a book. And instead of this, I would suggest the hermeneutics of goodwill. The hermeneutics of goodwill means that you try to understand and interpret a certain work to its better understanding. So how it would serve better that work, and if it's impossible, then critics can come. Also, gratefulness for what has been achieved and written in the past is a necessary attitude first, instead of the critical attitude, as well as respect. Another challenge is individualism. There is a fetishism of opinions in our world. This is the spirit of the age. So everyone has an opinion, and she or he is proud of it. There's nothing wrong with an opinion, of course, but it should come from erudition and knowledge and wisdom, so that it shouldn't be just sheer subjectivity. It should be brought into dialogue. The word I suggest is intersubjectivity. So especially in arts, we share our subjectivities, and we try to reach maybe not an agreement, but a common understanding of its merits, its values, its weaknesses. And maybe the last challenge I mentioned is politicization. So the progressivism, which is the spirit of the age, brings ideology to the subjects. I myself experience it in the faculty of law. I teach a philosophy of law, and it's taught in a very ideological way by some of the colleagues. Which is a bit strange. We Christians or conservative thinkers, we should fight for the freedom of thought and freedom of expression in the university, so that opinions shouldn't be homogenized.
The best way to understand how classical education is something really actual and up to the date, this is to understand that there is part of fundamental dynamics, and that it doesn't belong to the past. That we are out of this mindset that there is a progressivism that leads us to have a better day. For instance, Szabolcs had a great quote saying that you should understand the world reading the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other. What is important here, this is the dialectic between what is eternal and what is the current things. This is exactly the same with the glorious burden of this classical ancient legacy and our national identity. We shouldn't give up our national identity. We should understand it by understanding as well the former classical culture of former ages. When the Roman Republic became the world power, they did not copy and paste the Greek thinking. they adopt it. Great people do not like imitation. It works by emulation. The same with in the Middle Age, the way in which Europe created universities and reconnected with this scientific mind during the Renaissance, it's not copy and paste from the antique time. It's the connection between new nation emerging from the Middle Age, first of them Italians, but French as well, and Hungarian under the King Matthias, and the legacy of that past. The German Bildung and all this education in the German world, it's the German interpretation of this classical mindset. And so today, we should understand how to use this, let's say, eternal light of Greece and classical mind to reflect on our current challenges.
Thank you. And before we can draw on the dialectic to do such reflection, we first need the human subject that recognises that's a necessity to do. So I'm always very keen to put the human subjective will at the centre of things, because too often we are forgotten in the glamour and excitement of knowledge itself, which always seems the more immediate and important thing, which of course it is, but knowledge needs a knower, thinking needs a thinker, and we need to be aware that we're kind of failing or, quite weak in that respect at the moment, collectively and culturally. I'm mindful also, I think in terms of what the problems facing us, I think there is a hostility to the past, which is very corrosive. I think that arises from initially a spontaneous reaction amongst our elites in response to their own lack of confidence and vision and their own distance from their public. But now, of course, it's become institutionalized and disseminated throughout British society, certainly. I'm very also mindful of your realism. You called it anthropological realism. I think that's so important, because another really corrosive thing for classical education is the rampant utopianism that we see in the form of identity politics. It's a utopianism that refuses to meet human beings halfway in where we are, in our imperfections, as well as our more inspiring moments and our aspirations. It's a utopianism that wants a pre-made, ready-formed, perfect society without understanding that you need a process of trial and error and self-correction, self-reflection to improve things. And, perfection can never be reached. If it would, it would be the death of us. It's always a standard to which we aspire to. I'm also mindful of what János said about wanting to be practical as well as theoretical. And I think in Britain, certainly, you can see there has been a huge disrupture and a loss of institutional memory arising, actually, ironically, from the Conservatives' reforms in the 1980s in Britain. There's been a huge loss of institutional memory in education in terms of curricula that was taught, in terms of examination papers, in terms of the kind of codified norms that at that point were not so centralized as they have now become. One example, all of these things have allowed education to become a football of partisan politics to the detriment of education itself. And we see that institutionally in the loss of something like in Britain, you had between 1946 and 1968, you had the Central Advisory Council for Education, or CASE. And this was a body of cross-party and also, really more importantly, not just academics or politicians. It had people from civic, public life, the Scouts, unions, employers, and it sat across governments. So it allowed a certain insulation of education from the pressures of immediate political, interests. We need to find a way of providing that kind of space and buffering for education to restore it. So there's a kind of act of, we really need a kind of a historical reconstruction to try and re-find some of the things that we don't even know we've lost.
That's a very difficult question once again. To the elements to my biography, I am the father of 3 daughters. And why is it important? Now when I'm thinking about answering your question, if the question is if we understand in the area of education, the solution that we are offering in this area, they cannot be totally out of the cultural context. So we can, of course, plan a perfect school, a perfect program, but in a situation when the culture in which we live, we work, and the young people live, and the children as well, it leads to a totally different place. It's an anti-culture actually. And now, coming to the answer to the question, I don't want to repeat all the proper theses that have been said by my colleagues here. I would just like to raise some few thoughts. Well, we cannot we cannot cure the systemic education, nevertheless how we call it, without bringing back its character of freedom. But freedom in the sense of not liberalism as a political doctrine, but the liberalism, the freedom about freedom. So educating for self-independence in intellectual life. So if the education is not set for bringing children, young people to be self-independent either in the actual field, so that this person does not need an external programming from the people who want to think instead of him, act instead of him, tell him how family looks like, settle his marital relationships, friendships, and so on. So to this moment, we will not cure the school system. Another thing that is closely related is switching education from education that is utilitarian, which is set to what kind of person is needed, required, for example, from the point of view of the labor market or from the ideology that the political force that has won the elections needs to impose as the one and only right. So we will not substitute this utilitarian point of view by general education. So this would be an education that would take into consideration the whole human being that is supposed to give humans those skills that I have already mentioned. Nowadays we talk a lot about the competences. Even the European Union is writing there is 8 areas of competences, as far as I remember, that the politicians and national policies should adopt to. So these competences is the biggest, the greatest proof that we try to produce a human being that is independent, but not independent in his thoughts. He might be programmed in some areas, in some fields. He will be an expert, for example, an IT specialist, programmist, above any competition, but this person will not be thinking alone and on his own. He will need all the time this external input, and only when the education will be set to form, develop, as far as it is possible, of course, according to this person's possibilities, because this is not true that everyone has the same nature, the same skills, the same intellect, but we can achieve different levels of perfection. So we have to take into consideration individual skills, but we have to take care about the whole human being, and the very narrow specialist fields that are very popular nowadays, that are imposed from the very beginning, even from the kindergarten, when the child is supposed to recognize what is interesting him and just following his interest and taking away other things. This is a way, a path leading to nowhere, because this is supposed to give this person some kind of independence, but this is not real independence and same self-steering way of thinking, so that a human being can be able, alone, considering different rights, different criteria. What is critical thinking? This is a kind of thinking that is based on criteria. So first we have to be able to form them, to judge something, but nowadays we have ready-made, even at the very beginning of the education, there are very serious discussions on serious topics, but without giving any kind of knowledge and any criterion of proper thinking, proper conclusion making, so what was by the dialectic led in the past, so that we have a better intellect. Thank you.
As far as I know, all of the panelists had a pedagogical background, so I would like to ask, what is the role of a teacher in a classical education model, and how does it differ from the traditional pedagogical role? And I'm going to give the chance Arthur the first to answer this question.
Nowadays, in the era of education, the teachers, training the teachers and preparing them for their profession, I don't know how the Polish experience is the same for your countries as well, for your experience, but it's very bad. The situation is pretty bad, in a few words, because the teacher has stopped to be the one who was leading the child to the truth. So he was supposed to be a companion to show the truth, but is one step in front of the child. So the teacher is not the truth by itself. He has his authority from somewhere outside, from his external authority and the objective truth. And up to the moment when he's representing this very truth, he has this authority, but he loses it when he's steering the child away from the truth. In the moment when we question the truth, everyone can say what he or she feels. Today I feel this, tomorrow I will feel something else. So the teachers actually has become a kind of a master of emotions, of the experience of the classroom, of the children, without giving him tools that would be really effective to put him as a leader towards the truth. So we are coming back once again to the cultural context where we live, and the question of authorities, and the authority as such, and generally. So generally, to sum up, the teacher does not own the truth, he's only heading to the truth, he's one step in front of the child and accompanying the youth, the children to this truth, up to the moment when if he does not see that the truth does exist, that this human being, the child, can be developed, we cannot talk about proper teaching.
Well, I very much agree with I very much agree with what's been said about the intellectual authority of the teacher resting in the extent to which he or she represents the truth within their discipline that they're trying to convey and introduce children to. However, I think there's another aspect specific to teaching, which is that an authority, you need that authority, intellectual authority, but you also need a practical, if you like, a more practical or ethical-based authority to exert, to make those judgments, to say, no, you're wrong, yes, that's right, no, you can't do that, and yes, I can give you a reason, but not now, you come and see me at the end of the lesson, or I can't give you a reason now, you go to your mother and father, and this is their remit to talk with you about. So those are kind of practical judgments. They don't reside within the discipline itself. They reside within, phronesis or human experience, general experience that we all have as citizens, as mothers, as fathers, as well as teachers. And in the West, we face a real problem with that as well, because that runs very counter to the progressive idea that development and education depends upon shrinking back, depends upon not judging. depends upon allowing space for some ontological growth to develop, like a bean shoot. You know, children are like bean shoots. You just sort of water them a little bit and then just let them grow. There's no sense of struggle. There's no sense of engaging. There's no actively shaping into something that is collectively desirable. And that's what is needed for the practical authority as well.
Well, the question of who is the teacher is half of the question when it comes to classical education. Once again, back in the ancient time, the young Greek that was taught at that time, it was a young Athenians educated to become a citizen of Athens. The Spartan boys to be a citizen of Sparta. So there was a real relation to the place where they belong to, and not this education as a whole to be a citizen of the world. And this evolution came during the ancient time, of course, during the Roman Empire, when Rome was the world and not only a city. And it led to an artificial education where you learn a kind of global knowledge and you were part of the oikoumene, the Roman world. And this process of artificialization led to the collapse of civilization. And the Middle Age is a kind of complete renewal of the culture. And what's happened with the rise of modern nations is a fresh, newborn nation and identity that was able to apprehend the forms of classical genius. And how do we analyze this industrial society we are living in? This is, once again, the massification of education, the massification of allegedly classical knowledge, but it's very, very far from classical mind, to my opinion. Janos explained in his keynote speech how, at least in Polish or Hungarian schools, we teach Polish and Hungarian children, and that's not the case anymore in France or in Belgium. But this is the process that you have only civil servants that, as a professional, based on a contract, teach a program that is managed by professional educators. It's very far from this classical relation, this original unity of the who is teaching and who are the children, who are the pupils. So what is decisive for my understanding of renewal of classical education and the role of the teacher is to be a godfather as well as a professor, is to be a figure that of the completeness that bring together spiritual education and the classical based on knowledge and skills. So this is this unity of culture what is at stake. And of course, that to that extent, we cannot heal the system of the wall, but this is the interest of precise projects and initiative that rewire the very sense of classical education.
A teacher can have many roles. I'm again speaking about university. Christianity and other world religions can offer the master and disciple role for teacher and student. Of course, it's very rare, but in the level of PhD education or even in MA or BA level, it's possible with some extremely talented pupils. In that case, the master gives a holistic pedagogy and showing with his life and explaining his or her life and explaining with his or her words. The teacher can be a role model and should aim to be a role model. She or he should lead a moral life. Of course, she or he cannot be a saint necessarily, but a person who strives for the good in her or his life. And the teachers, the pupils should see that it's a meaningful life which the teacher lives. The students, the pupils are hungry for the meaning of life in general, and the meaning of their own life, and the teacher should radiate that it's possible to find a meaning or to give a meaning to one's life. In the classroom, there is time for democracy and time for authority. They don't exclude one the other. We can discuss methods or order of things or what to play and what not to play, but authority should come to the fore when it's time for it, giving judgments on the value of things. There are intellectual virtues which a teacher should share and should radiate, like curiosity to the world, intellectual honesty, industry, concentration, openness, and the love of truth. When I was learning moral theology, I found it important that it shouldn't be only the results which a teacher shares with the students and pupils, but also the arguments, the way how those results were reached, because this is the most convincing, and not just learning the results. And the last thought is Roger Scruton talks about oikophilia. The teacher should be a model for this, how to be a local patriot in one's city or village, and how to love your country, your region in Europe, like Central Europe, your continent, your civilization, and the whole world, all in concentric circles.
Okay, unfortunately our time is up, so I would like to say thank you for joining for the first panel today. I hope we can continue this fruitful discussion during the coffee break. So I wish you an inspiring day at the rest of the conference. Dziękuję, thank you.